She spends 7 days learning the manner the way she used to learn a new client's internal network, not by scanning for vulnerabilities first, but by listening to the people who had been inside it long enough to know where the load-bearing walls were. The difference, and it mattered more than she had expected it to, was that she was not running a social engineering play. She was not building rapport to extract something these people would not willingly give. She was asking questions because she genuinely needed answers, and she was willing to sit in the silence while the answers assembled themselves from what people almost said. Ren was first. The head cook had been with House Vane for 31 years, which Nova learned not from Ren herself, but from a notation in the household ledger she found while looking for something unrelated in the West Wing correspondence office. Ren ran the kitchens with the particular authority of someone whose competence was never in doubt and whose temper was only deployed when competence was in doubt in someone else. She was broad-shouldered, gray-haired, and moved through the manor's corridors with the economy of a person who had long ago decided which routes were worth her time. Nova found her on the 4th morning, peeling root vegetables at the central prep table while 2 younger kitchen girls worked the stoves behind her. She said, "Good morning, Ren. May I sit?" Ren looked at her once, assessed, and said, "The stool's there if your dress can survive flour." Nova pulled the stool to the edge of the table and sat. She did not explain why she was there. Explanation, in her experience, was what you offered when you wanted someone to perform the response you had scripted. She was not scripting anything. For the first 20 minutes, she did not ask a single question about Lady Kira Vane. She asked about the kitchen's winter stores. She asked whether the eastern trade route had been reliable this season. She listened to Ren explain the difference between 2 varieties of river grain with the focused attention of someone who intended to remember, which she did. On the 2nd morning, she came back with a question about the herb garden, specifically whether the southern wall got enough light for the variety of blue leaf that the manor's physician preferred for fever inscriptions. Ren answered this with slightly more warmth than the day before, and added, unprompted, that blue leaf had been Lady Kira's preference too, for a different preparation. Nova said, "You've been here since before she married in?" Ren's knife paused on the root vegetable. "Not long. Half a second." She said, "I was here when she arrived. Younger than you are now. Already reading 3 books at once and asking the stable master questions about mineral composition like he was a professor." Nova said, "What was she like?" Ren was quiet for a moment. Then she said, like someone who already knew the answer and was trying to decide whether the question was worth her time. She resumed peeling. "Your brother has that look sometimes. When he's working on something he won't explain." Nova filed this without writing it down. Some information stayed better in memory than on paper, especially paper that could be found. Dov took longer. The stable master had been hired by Lady Kira Vane personally, 7 years before her death, which Nova confirmed through the estate's hiring records on her 3rd afternoon in the West Wing office, a room she entered by being polite to Purin, the correspondence clerk, and asking if there was a list of long-term staff she should know for the academy departure preparations. Purin, who treated paperwork as a form of moral order, produced the list without suspicion. Dov was not in the kitchens. He was in the stables at dawn and the stables at dusk and rarely anywhere in between except the equipment shed, where he repaired tack with the focused silence of a man who considered conversation a tool and not a habit. Nova went to the stables on the 5th morning with a legitimate reason. She needed to confirm the carriage schedule for the eventual journey to Valeheim, and stayed long enough to watch Dov check a horse's shoes with hands that knew exactly what they were looking for. She said, "My mother hired you." He did not look up. He said she did. She said, "Do you mind if I ask why?" He finished with the shoe. He straightened. He was shorter than she expected and weathered in the specific way of people who worked outdoors in eastern river valleys, the skin textured by sun and wind, the eyes still sharp. He said, "Because I told her the truth about what her carriage horses needed, and the previous stable master had been lying about it for profit." He picked up his tools. She appreciated honesty. "I appreciated being employed by someone who could tell the difference." Nova said, "Did she spend much time in the stables?" Dov looked at her directly for the first time. He said, "She spent time wherever the problem was. That's what she was like." He paused. "The old you didn't spend time wherever the problem was." The sentence landed in the stable air between them with the flat precision of a statement that was not an accusation, and was not an invitation, and was simply true. Nova said no. She did not elaborate. Dov held her gaze for one more second, then went back to his tools. On the 6th morning she brought him tea without being asked to. She had noticed he drank it at mid-morning from a tin cup on the equipment shed shelf, and set it on the shelf and left without waiting for acknowledgement. When she came back an hour later, the cup was empty. That was acknowledgement enough. Finn watched her from doorways. The chambermaid was 15, quick-eyed, and had the particular caution of someone who had learned that the eldest daughter of this house was someone to stand near, but not near enough to be noticed by. Nova had decided on the second day not to use Finn as a source, not because Finn would not have information, but because Finn was too young to be recruited into an adult's intelligence operation without leaving damage, and Nova was trying, in this life, to stop leaving damage in her wake. She made a point of being unremarkable around Finn. She said please and thank you. She did not ask Finn to carry messages that were not Finn's job. On the 7th day, Finn left fresh linens without the half-second hesitation at the door that had become habitual. Alia, the head housekeeper, Nova engaged only once, a brief conversation about the East Wing study, which Alia referred to as her ladyship's study, with a formality that suggested the room had become a kind of shrine no one was permitted to disturb. Alia said the Duke kept it locked. Alia did not say why. Her face did the saying instead, grief managed into procedure. By the 7th evening, Nova had assembled, from negative space and near sayings and one direct sentence from a stable master, a picture of Lady Kira Vane that no history book in the library had given her. Kira had been brilliant and impatient and honest in the specific way that made institutions nervous. She had hired people who told the truth. She had worked in whatever room the problem was in. She had used cipher notation. She had been reading 3 books at once at 17. She had also, according to Ren, on the 7th morning when Nova returned for a 3rd time to the prep table, stopped sleeping properly in the last year before she died. Nova said, "Do you know why?" Ren did not answer immediately. She set down her knife. She said, very quietly, because she had figured something out and couldn't decide whether the world was ready for it. She picked up the knife again. I don't know what it was. I know she was right to lose sleep over it. Nova sat with the stool and the flour dust and the smell of root vegetables and thought about proof and publication and carriage accidents and the distance between figuring something out and surviving the figuring. She thought, negative space is still a map. You just have to be willing to look at what's missing. She thanked Ren for the tea she had not been offered and went back to her room and opened the notebook under the floorboard and wrote in the notebook, Kira, brilliant, impatient, honest, cipher. Last year, something found. East Wing study locked since death. Staff grief is real. Old Nova, not someone they trusted with any of this. She closed the notebook. Outside, the manor settled into its evening sounds, distant kitchen work, a horse shifting in the stable yard, the particular silence of a large house pretending it was not full of people who remembered things. She had spent 7 days not manipulating anyone. It was, she thought, the strangest week of her professional life. The first villainous event from the novel arrived on the 43rd day, and it did not announce itself. That was the thing about pre-built social attacks. The ones that worked were never the ones that came with a subject line. In Hannah Seo's previous life, the effective campaigns were always ambient first. A document in the wrong folder, a meeting rescheduled by someone who did not know they were being used, a rumor that existed before anyone could trace it to source. The novel had described this one in a single paragraph she half remembered. The old Nova arranged for a Loon household servant to be publicly accused of petty theft during a visit to Vane Manor, seeding the narrative that House Loon could not manage its people. Petty theft. Public accusation. A servant who would be dismissed, a house embarrassed, a small cruelty that would compound later into something larger she could not see from chapter 40. She found it in motion because she had learned, over 6 weeks, to read the manor's ambient traffic the way she used to read server logs, not for the anomaly flagged in red, but for the pattern that was 1 degree off normal. The Loon delegation was expected. House Loon and House Vane maintained Eastern-Western trade relationships that required periodic courtesy visits, and the household ledger showed a notation for Loon household retinue, 6 persons, 2 nights, arriving on the 42nd afternoon. Nova had noted it when Perrin mentioned it in passing, not because she expected villainy, but because any external visit was a data event in a house she was still mapping. She did not expect the villainy to still be executable without the villain. The planted object was a silver locket. She found it because Fun, on the morning of the visit's second day, was assigned to prepare the guest corridor sitting room and came back to the linen cupboard with a face that had gone carefully neutral in the way of someone who had seen something they were not supposed to mention and had decided, at 15, that mentioning it was above their pay grade and below their safety. Nova intercepted her in the service passage between the east and west wings, not by cornering her, but by being already in the passage with a stack of books she was legitimately carrying back from the library. She said, "Fun, you look like you've seen a ghost." Finn said, "I'm fine, my lady." Nova said, "I'm not asking as your lady. I'm asking as someone who used to work in places where I'm fine meant something is wrong and I can't say it." She paused. "You don't have to tell me what. You can tell me where." Finn looked at her. The caution was still there. But underneath it, something else, the specific calculation of a person deciding whether the person in front of them was safer than the situation. Finn said, very quietly, "Guest sitting room. Under the cushion of the window seat. I was changing the cover." Nova said, "Thank you." She did not ask Finn to show her. She went to the guest sitting room herself, 10 minutes later, with a legitimate reason. She was checking whether the library had delivered the historical trade volume the Loon steward had requested. The room was empty. The window seat cushion was smooth. She lifted it. The locket was small, Loonwork silver, the kind that carried a household mark on the clasp. It was not valuable enough to be catastrophic and valuable enough to be embarrassing, exactly the right weight for a petty theft accusation. Tucked where a guest servant would be seen, discovering it during afternoon service, which meant someone in the Vane household staff had been instructed to position a witness. She sat on the window seat and thought about the novel's paragraph and the old Nova's campaign plans and the 3 items marked already arranged that she had burned 6 weeks ago. Some arrangements, it turned out, had persistence like malware, installed before the operator lost access, set to execute on a timer she had not been able to see. She picked up the locket. She examined the clasp. She noted the Loon mark. She put it in her pocket and replaced the cushion exactly as Finn had found it. Then she went to find who was supposed to discover it. It took her 40 minutes. Not because the household was large, but because the discovery script required 2 participants, the person who planted the object, which was already done, and the person who would find it at the right moment with the right audience. The second person was harder to identify because they were not doing anything yet. They were only waiting. She found the waiting in the kitchen corridor at 2:30, where a junior footman named Colm was positioned with a tray he did not need, speaking to another footman in a tone that was performing casual and failing by 1 degree. She knew Colm by sight. He had been on the periphery of the old Nova social orbit, not inner circle, the kind of person recruited for errands because they wanted proximity to power and would not ask what the errands were for. She did not confront him. Confrontation was what you did when you wanted a confession and a scene. She wanted neither. She wanted the event to not happen, which required a quieter surgery, remove the object, reroute the participants, let the scheduled moment arrive to an empty stage. She went to Ren first. This was a risk. Ren had known Kira Vane and had watched the old Nova become what she became, and had complicated feelings Nova was only beginning to understand. But Ren also ran the kitchen corridor like a sovereign state, and Colm's performance of casual was happening in Ren's territory. Nova said, "Ren, I need the junior footman Colm assigned to the West Terrace for the next 3 hours." Ren looked at her. She said, "Why?" Nova said, "Because if he stays in the guest corridor, something is going to happen that will embarrass this house in front of House Loon, and I would prefer it didn't." The silence between them was not long. Ren said, "What kind of something?" Nova said, "The kind that involves a planted object and a public accusation against a Loon servant." Ren's expression did not change. Something behind her eyes did. She said, "Colm. West Terrace." Now. It was not a request. Colm went. Nova went to the loon servant herself, a woman named Hest, middle-aged, efficient, who had been managing the delegation's luggage with the unflappable confidence of someone who had done this work for 20 years. Nova found her in the courtyard where the loon horses were being watered. She said, "Mistress Hest, forgive the interruption. The guest sitting room will be closed for the next hour, maintenance on the window fittings. You may want to reschedule any service there." Hest said, "Thank you, my lady. I'll tell the steward." Nova said, "Also, if anyone asks whether you've been in the sitting room this afternoon, the accurate answer is no." Hest looked at her. She was not a fool. She said, "Is there a problem I should report to my household?" Nova said, "There was going to be. There isn't now." Hest held her gaze for 2 seconds, then nodded once and returned to the horses. The moment the novel had described, the public accusation, the embarrassed servant, the seed planted, arrived at 3 o'clock in the guest corridor, where Colm was not and Hest was not. And the sitting room door was closed with a maintenance sign Wren had produced without being asked to explain it. Nova watched from the library window. Nothing happened. The corridor remained ordinary. A loon steward walked through on the way to the library. A vain housemaid carried linens. The afternoon sun moved across the stone floor in the unremarkable way of afternoons that were not going to become anyone's anecdote. Nova exhaled. She stood at the library window for a long moment with her hand flat against the glass, feeling the cold ripple in the old pane against her palm. She thought, "I changed the script." She thought, "The world did not collapse." She thought, "That is either very good news or evidence that the script I read was incomplete, and given my track record with incomplete information, I should assume both." In her pocket, the locket was a small weight against her hip. She would return it to the loon steward before departure, anonymously, via Wren's kitchen route, with no note. Let it be a lost item found, not a crisis averted. Some interventions worked best when no one knew they had been interventions. That night she wrote in the notebook, Event 1, Novel Loon Servant Theft Accusation, Disrupted. Mechanism, Pre-planted Object, Timed Discovery. Old Nova Network still has executable assets in-house. Colm, Peripheral, Usable, Not Yet Addressed. First proof, the story can be changed without announcement. Watch for second-order effects. She closed the notebook and blew out her lamp. In the dark she thought about 40 chapters of a web novel and the distance between knowing a plot point and knowing who had built the infrastructure that made the plot point run without the protagonist in the room. She thought, someone installed a cron job before I got root access. She thought, I need to find the rest of the scheduled tasks. She went to sleep. Grand Archivist Veton Crane arrived on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and expensive horses. Nova knew he was coming because the household knew he was coming. Quarterly visits from the girl's godfather were on the estate calendar the way tides were on a coastal chart, predictable and capable of rearranging everything in their path. Alia had the guest rooms prepared. Wren had been asked about dietary preferences. Dov had inspected the carriage approach for mud. The manor, which had been operating around Nova's careful quiet for 6 weeks, shifted into a different kind of order. The order of a house preparing to be seen by someone who mattered. Nova dressed in onyx and copper without overperforming the formality. The old Nova would have constructed an entrance. She chose a dress that was correct and went downstairs early to read in the library until he arrived, because waiting in a room with books was the most honest version of herself she could offer without explanation. She was on the second chapter of a trade history when she heard the carriage. He came in through the main hall with the particular presence of a man who had been making rooms feel smaller and safer at the same time for longer than most people in Vailden had been alive. Veton Crane was not tall. He did not need to be. He had the kind of face that people described later as kind, and the kind of eyes that made you understand the kindness was not ignorance. He looked at you as though you were interesting, as though your thoughts were worth attending to, as though being in the room with you was exactly where he had wanted to be. His hair was white and well kept. His clothes were crane colors, white and silver, without ostentation. He moved like a man whose body was a courtesy he paid to other people's nerves. He saw her in the library doorway and his face changed in a way she could not fake and would not want to. He said, Nova. She said, Godfather. He crossed the room and took her hands, both of them, warm, steady, and looked at her with an assessment that was not Rian's political recalculation and not Mavet's professional monitoring. Something older. Something that had been watching her since before she was someone worth watching. He said, "You've been working hard." She said, "I've been trying to." He said, "Mavet tells me you've been reading the foundational texts. The real ones." He paused. "And my volume. The architecture." She said, "Instructor Mavet was kind enough to pass it along." Crane's smile was genuine. That was the problem with him. Already, in the first minute, the warmth was not a layer. It was structural. He said, "And what do you think of it?" She had prepared for this question the way she used to prepare for client discovery calls, not with lies, but with the truth arranged to reveal only what she intended to reveal. She said, "I think it's a very clear presentation of the modern framework. I think the notation is elegant. I think I understand better why the Academy teaches the way it teaches." He watched her face while she said it. She let him. He said, "But..." She said, "But I keep wondering what was left out to make it that clear." The pause that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the pause of two people who were both intelligent enough to hear what had just been said. Crane said, gently, "That is an excellent question. May I sit?" They sat in the library chairs by the south window, where the light was clean and level, the same chairs she had used on her first day. He asked her what she had been studying. She showed him the pre-academy foundational text, not hidden, not performed as a discovery. She said she had found it on the bottom shelf. She said she found the notation familiar. He said, "Cipher tradition." She said, "My father mentioned my mother used it." Crane's expression shifted, not much, a fraction, and she caught it. Grief, old and managed and still present. He said she did. She was one of the finest natural cipher minds I have ever encountered. He looked at the book in her hands. "You're working from first principles." She said, "I'm trying to." He said, "That's the only way that ever produces anything worth keeping." They talked for an hour. He asked about her examination preparation. He asked about her notation practice. He asked, with the specific interest of a man who loved theory the way other people loved music, whether she had encountered any emergent effects in her private work. She said she had the self-adjusting light inscription and described it in technical terms without describing how far she had taken it. He listened with the focused delight of someone hearing a language spoken correctly by a student he had hopes for. She did not tell him about the 12 operations. She did not tell him about the 5 missing ones. She did not tell him about the notebook under the floorboard or the boundary analysis of his architecture volume. She told him enough to be honest. She withheld enough to survive. At the end of the hour he rose and said, "I brought you something. I was going to wait until after dinner, but I think you may be ready for it now." He went to his travel case in the hall, brought by a servant, always within reach, the habit of a man who carried his work with him, and returned with a book. It was leather-bound, darker than the architecture volume, with no Academy insignia on the cover. The title, embossed in silver, Historical Innovations in Inscription Theory, a survey of schools, methods, and outcomes. He said, "This is not in the curriculum. It won't be. But I want you to understand how we arrived at the framework you're learning, not just the framework itself, but the history of what was tried before it." She took the book. It was heavy. It smelled of good binding and older paper. She said, "Thank you. This is extraordinary." He said, "You remind me of her when you say that, when you mean it and don't perform it." He touched the book's cover lightly, almost a blessing. "Read it carefully. Come back to me with questions." She said, "I will." He smiled. "I know you will." Dinner was a household affair, Rian present, formal but not cold, Theo present and silent in the way that was still his default in rooms with adults who had history. Crane spoke about the Academy's coming term with the easy authority of a man who shaped it. He asked Theo about his inscription practice with the careful interest of someone who meant the question. Theo answered in short sentences. Crane listened as though the sentences were enough. Nova watched Crane work the room the way she watched any skilled operator work a room, not with contempt, with professional respect and professional caution. He made everyone feel seen. He made the evening feel like a gift. He made it almost possible to forget that his architecture volume was a boundary document and his response time to Mavet's reports was 3 days. Almost. After dinner, he found her alone in the library again. She had gone back for the trade history, a prop for solitude that was also genuine. He said, "Walk with me in the garden." They walked. The Inscription garden at evening was different from the Inscription garden at midnight. The light still present, the stone tablets visible, the third planter ordinary looking in the way of objects that held secrets they were not yet ready to share. Crane admired the tablets with the appreciation of a scholar. He asked whether she practiced here. She said sometimes at night when the household was quiet. He said, "Good. Inscription is not a performance for an audience. It's a conversation with the material." She said, "That's a nice way to put it." He said, "It's the accurate way." He paused at the fountain basin. "Your mother practiced here. I used to find her out here at midnight as well." Nova was very still. He said, "She said the garden was the only place in the house where the work could hear itself think." Nova said, "That sounds like her." Crane looked at her. In the evening light his face was not the Godfather's face or the archivist's face. It was something more private. He said, "I miss her." Nova said, "I never knew her." He said, "I know." He turned back toward the manor. "Which is why I take a particular interest in you, Nova. I would like to see you become what she could have become if the world had been ready." She walked beside him and thought about publication and carriage accidents and proofs hidden in desks and the specific sincerity of a man who believed readiness was something other people got to decide. She said, "I'll try to be worth the interest." He said, "You already are." The warmth in it was real. That was exactly the problem. After he left the following morning, carriage at dawn, the household exhaling back into its normal pressures, she sat in her room with the new book and opened it. The first chapter was beautifully written. The second chapter described 3 inscription schools that had failed to achieve stability. The 5th chapter used the word superseded 9 times. The 8th chapter classified cipher notation as a theoretically elegant but practically limited framework, historically associated with the several schools' more destabilizing tendencies. She read for 3 hours. Everything interesting about inscription development was described as having been a failed dead end. Every innovation that would have expanded the approved framework was described as having produced catastrophic outcomes without citing the catastrophes. Every researcher who had pursued the missing operations was described as having abandoned the inquiry or been unable to reproduce results. It was the architecture volume in historical costume, the same boundary, the same closures, the same map of a territory deliberately drawn smaller than the territory was. She closed the book. She wrote in the notebook, "Crane in person, warm, perceptive, genuine grief for Kira. Genuine interest in me, not performance. Also, sent architecture via Mavet, now historical innovations. Same bounded framework." He is not lying. He believes. Belief is the hardest kind of adversary. It doesn't need to deceive itself. It already did the work. She put the book on the shelf beside the architecture volume, both beautiful, both gifts, both maps of a cage drawn with affectionate precision. Outside, the rain that had been threatening all morning finally arrived. She listened to it on the roof and thought, "I genuinely like him." She thought, "I genuinely cannot trust him." She thought, "These things are both true and neither resolves the other." She picked up the pre-academy foundational text and went back to work. Theo came to her door on the 58th night. She was at the desk with the pre-academy foundational text open and the cipher notebook beside it, not the one under the floorboard, a decoy stack of ordinary notes she kept visible for anyone who entered without permission. She had learned in her previous life that the best place to hide something important was behind something unimportant that looked like it had already been found. The knock was 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. She knew it was Theo before she opened the door because he had started using that pattern in the garden, a communication protocol, however small, however reluctant. She said, "Come in." He had never entered her room voluntarily before. He stood in the doorway for a moment without crossing the threshold, as though the threshold were a line in a contract he was reading before signing. He was 14 in the way that made 15 look like a cliff, all edges, no landing yet. His hair needed cutting. His hands were ink-stained in the gray-white of early cipher work that had not yet settled into its final color. He was holding a battered leather folder against his chest with both arms. He said, "I brought these." She said, "Okay." He crossed the threshold. He set the folder on her desk with the careful precision of someone putting down something that had weight beyond its physical mass. He said, "She left them in the garden. Under the third planter. In a box." He did not look at her while he said it. "I found them 2 years ago. I don't know what most of them mean." Nova said, "Our mother's notes." He said, "Yes." The emphasis on the first word was smaller than it had been in the garden, not insistence now, but fact. "I've been looking at them. I don't have enough context." She said, "May I?" He stepped back from the desk. "Not far. Far enough." She opened the folder. The first page was handwriting she had never seen and recognized anyway, the particular pressure of someone who thought faster than they wrote and had learned to compress notation to keep up with their own mind. Cipher notation. Dense. Marginal annotations in a second hand that was probably her own at 12 or 13, copying exercises without understanding them yet. She turned pages. Working notes. Not the proof. She did not know that yet, not consciously, but the scaffolding around a problem, conditional grammar tests, efficiency calculations, questions written in the margins as provocations rather than conclusions. The margins asked, why does the approved sequence cap at 7 operations when the grammar supports 12? If the cap is artificial, what is the efficiency cost? Test. Compound conditional with self-referential branch. Result exceeds standard output by. The number at the end was scratched out and rewritten 3 times. Nova sat down. Theo was still standing by the door, watching her face the way he watched inscriptions activate for the moment the notation did what it was supposed to do. She said, "These are extraordinary." He said, "I know there's something." "I don't know what." She said, "They're the working notes of someone who is figuring out that the official framework is smaller than reality." He was quiet. She said, "How much have you tried to use?" He said, "Some. Not the complicated pages. The sequences at the back. The ones that look like exercises." He paused. "That's how I knew about the pause notation. One of her drills." Nova looked at him. 14. Carrying this alone for 2 years. Practicing dead mother's drills in a garden at midnight because there was nowhere else to put the love and nowhere else to put the anger. She said, "Thank you for bringing them." He said, "I didn't know if I should." She said, "You should have." He flinched, not away, just a small recoil, the old reflex of someone who had learned that her approval used to cost something. She did not take it back. She let it stand. He said, "Are you going to tell father?" She said, "Not yet. Not until I know what we're holding." He said, "We." She looked at him. He had chosen the word deliberately. He was not offering trust. He was stating a boundary he had decided to enforce. If she was going to work with Kira's notes, she was not going to work with them alone in a room he was not allowed in. She said, "We." He nodded once. He went to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. He said, "Don't lose them." She said, "I won't." He left. She did not sleep. She read Lady Kira Vane's handwriting until the lamp burned low, and she lit a second candle and read until the candle guttered, and she lit the lamp again and read until the sky outside went from black to gray-blue, and the household began its morning sounds. The notes were not a proof. They were better than that. In a way, they were the mind that would later produce a proof. Impatient, rigorous, unwilling to accept a cap because a curriculum said the cap existed. Kira had tested self-referential branches. Kira had measured efficiency deltas. Kira had written questions in the margins that were, functionally, attack vectors against an approved system she had not yet named as approved. Nova thought, she was doing what I do. She was reading the code and asking why the function returned less than the inputs justified. Nova thought, someone killed her for getting close to the answer. She thought, Crane grieved her and also sent me 2 books designed to keep me inside the same walls she was trying to break. She thought, Theo has been practicing her drills without knowing what they were for, and he got the pause notation right on the 3rd try. She closed the folder at dawn and pressed her palms flat on the desk and breathed until her hands stopped trembling. Not from fear. From the specific overwhelm of finding a person in handwriting, abstract love becoming specific, a mother becoming someone with a mind and a pen and a question she had not lived to finish. She memorized what she could not carry safely. By morning, she had transferred the critical notation sequences into her private cipher system, not copies of the pages, but the logic, encoded in a notation that looked like doodles to anyone who did not know what they were looking at. The kind of obfuscation she had used in her previous life for things that could not exist on a client server in plain text. She returned the folder to the desk and waited. Theo came back at mid-morning on the pretense of retrieving a book he had left. The folder was where he had put it. He looked at it. He looked at her. She said, "I read them." He said, "All of them." She said, "All of them." He said, "And." She said, "And our mother was right about everything she suspected, and someone made sure she didn't get to say so out loud." Theo's jaw tightened. He did not ask who. He was 14, but he was Kira Vane's son and Rian Vane's son, and he knew what a silence meant when it was that specific shape. He said, "Are you going to finish it?" Nova looked at the folder. She looked at her brother. She said, "I'm going to try." He said, "Okay." He picked up the folder. He left. She sat in the morning light and thought about inheritance, not the ducal kind, the other kind. The kind that was questions written in margins and drills left in garden boxes, and a 14-year-old boy who had kept them alive without knowing what alive meant in this context. She thought, Lady Kira Vane's children. She wrote in the notebook, "I have her notes. I have her grammar. I do not have her proof. East Wing studies still locked." She closed it. She went downstairs for breakfast and ate because her body required fuel and because the work ahead was going to require more of her than she currently had. And one thing Hannah Seo had always understood was that you did not win by refusing to maintain the hardware. She wrote the plan on the 65th day because plans were what she did when the problem space finally had enough edges to hold a shape. Not a heroic document. Not a manifesto. A project spec, objectives, dependencies, risks, timeline, the way she used to write engagement briefs before she took jobs she should not have taken. The difference was the client was herself, and the deliverable was not dying. She sat at the writing desk with a clean stack of paper and a pen, and the particular calm of someone who had moved from panic into procedure. Panic was for the first week. Procedure was for everything after. She wrote the timeline first. 70 days to the academy entrance examination, 10 of them lost to travel and embassy lodging, 60 of actual working time. Then she wrote what had to happen inside those 60 days, in the same clipped language she had used for engagement briefs when the client was herself and the deliverable was not dying. Inscription rank came first. She needed rank 2 confirmed by examination standards, while privately she was already past that line, compound logic, conditional bridges, the gap between what she could do at midnight in the garden and what anyone in a witness room was allowed to see. She would close that gap through cipher derivations from Kira's working notes and the pre-academy foundational text for sessions a week minimum in the inscription garden after the household slept. The risk was visibility. Advance too fast and Mavet's reports would trip Crane's 3-day response pipeline. Mitigation was simple and costly. Perform rank 1 in public until calibration demanded otherwise. Social landscape came second. 7 correspondents still active or semi-active. Edwick redirected. Sephra's invitation accepted. Foreign seating question pending. M unresolved. She would map the old Nova's network before arrival, extract topology from response patterns, commit to no hostilities and no premature alliances. Colm's rerouted theft script had taught her that some schemes persisted without the operator. She would audit the household for remaining timed executions and watch correspondence for instructions written to a person who no longer existed. Mavet was third. Remove him without exposing what he was. She could not go to Rian with insufficient evidence. That would alert Crane. She could not sabotage him. That created victims and noise. She could make him irrelevant. Formal petition, independent study, examination readiness as justification. She underlined that option. Rian had been watching for 6 weeks. The probability of approval was moderate and rising if she demonstrated competence without scandal. The East Wing study was fourth Kira's territory beyond the garden box, locked since death, proof location unknown. Do not force. Earn Rian. Keep cultivating staff. Theo was a partial asset now. Crane's interest in her cipher work and the 2 beautiful boundary volumes on her shelf were the risk. Survive was fifth. Do not die again. First villainous event already disrupted. 40 chapters of novel and no guarantee how many scripts remained. Assume incomplete documentation. Watch for scheduled executions. Change outcomes quietly. Unknown unknowns. M. The campaign funder, the pipeline upstream of Mavet. She stared at the last line and added beneath it, 40 chapters is a partial API documentation. Do not treat it as complete system map. She built the dependency graph in the margin, small boxes, arrows, the habit of a mind that thought in structures. Mavet removal reduced Crane's direct curriculum control, but increased his interest. Rank 2 achievement was required for examination, but increased academy visibility. Reintrust led to East Wing access, led to possible proof, led to extreme risk if Crane learned. The critical path was sequencing. Quiet things first, irreversible things only after the board had been read. At the bottom she wrote, default posture, pleasant, competent, unremarkable except where remarkable is strategically necessary. Do not perform redemption. Be functional. See if the difference matters. She paused and tapped the pen against the paper. In her previous life, she had once built a credential harvesting campaign that ran for 11 weeks without detection because she had treated visibility as a threat model variable rather than an afterthought. Same principle. Different stakes. That afternoon she walked the manor's perimeter the way she had on the second day, not for exercise, but for orientation. 70 days. 60 working days. An examination that would place her in an institution she knew from 40 chapters of fiction and 6 weeks of evidence that the fiction had omitted the important parts. The hills were green. The air smelled like rain not yet fallen. Somewhere in the stables Dov was doing something honest with a horse's shoes. She thought about Hannah Seo at 27, running from men she had profiled incorrectly, reading a web novel on her phone in a car park like it was the last entertainment on earth. She thought about Nova at 17, with a mother in the margins and a godfather who grieved sincerely and a brother who had said we. She folded the plan into thirds and put it in the same inside pocket where she had once kept a folded inventory on the first day. Not triumphant. Honest. That evening she tested the plan against reality the way she used to test a deployment checklist against a live environment, not assuming the document was correct, assuming the document was a hypothesis until the system confirmed or denied it. She started with Mavet because the petition could move while the household still slept. She drafted the language 3 times. The first version was too defensive. The second read like an accusation of incompetence that would route straight to Crane as Nova fracturing from supervised instruction. The third was the one she would file, neutral, examination-focused, respectful of Mavet's service, while clearly stating it had been outgrown. She had learned that tone writing emails to executives whose egos were load-bearing infrastructure. You did not tell them they were wrong. You told them the situation had evolved beyond the current architecture. Then rank an afternoon in the library with Kira's memorized sequences and the pre-academy text open to the rank 2 threshold chapter. Emergent effects described like release notes for a language feature the approved curriculum had deprecated. When 2 or more conditional branches interact, unscripted output may occur. In her previous life, unscripted output was either a bug bounty or a felony. In Veilden it was a rank requirement. Then social, 3 of 7 pending replies, pleasant and non-committal, calibrated to each correspondent. Edwick got warmth. Maris got distance. Casson got accounts under review, which was corporate speak for you will not be paid today, and I am not explaining why. Then survival, a walk through household corridors after dark, noting who remained on the old Nova's informal payroll of access and favors. Colm rerouted but not removed. Monitor, do not confront. Confrontation created martyrs. Rerouting created confusion. Confusion was useful. At midnight, she went to the Inscription garden and practiced conditional bridges until her cipher ink steadied from gray-white towards something darker, and the stone under her hand held the reinforcement inscription on the 4th try. And she dismissed it and wrote it again from memory on the 5th, and on the 6th, she wrote a compound sequence with 2 inputs and a pause notation Theo had learned from Kira's drills, and it held. The emergent branch flickered on the 7th, humidity again, the environment inserting variables she had not specified, the grammar doing what grammar did when it was complete enough to think for itself. She sat back and looked at the purple-black notation drying on the stone. She thought, 60 days. She thought, enough, if I don't waste them on performing the wrong person in the wrong rooms. She thought about the plan in her pocket, and the mother in the margins, and the godfather's gifts on her shelf, 3 maps of the same cage drawn by different hands. She dismissed the inscription. She wiped the tablet clean for Theo's morning practice. She left no trace except the work itself, which was the only kind of trace that mattered. She blew out the lamp and walked back inside. The manor was quiet. For now, that was a resource. She slept 4 hours. She woke before the household and began the day as someone who had decided, without certainty and without a guarantee, that the next 60 days were worth spending as if they led somewhere other than the ending the novel had promised. That was not faith. It was engineering. She filed the petition on the 73rd morning. The document was formal because Rian Vane responded to formal things not because formality was warmth, but because it was respect for the machinery of a house that ran on paperwork the way networks ran on protocols. You did not bypass the protocol unless you wanted the system to treat you as an attack. She wrote the petition herself, in the careful hand she had been practicing for correspondence, and had Perrin register it in the West Wing correspondence log before second breakfast. The request: termination of the private tutor arrangement with instructor Mavet, authorization to pursue independent study from the Manor Library's primary inscription texts in preparation for the Academy entrance examination. Grounds: demonstrated progress through foundational theory, examination timeline, recommendation that remaining weeks be allocated to self-directed practice rather than supervised sequence review. She did not mention cipher notation. She did not mention the architecture volume. She did not mention Crane. She mentioned examination readiness because it was true and because it was the kind of truth Rian could verify without trusting her character. Rian called her to the study on the 74th afternoon. She had expected this. The petition was not a surprise to him, Perrin's log was not a secret, and Rian Vane did not learn about household administrative actions from household administrative actions. He learned about them before they happened, or he arranged to learn about them the moment they did. He had the petition on his desk. He did not ask her to sit immediately. He said, "You want Mavet dismissed?" She said, "I want to study independently for the remaining weeks before examination." The tutor arrangement was useful. "I don't think it's useful anymore." He said, "Mavet has been with us for 3 years." She said, "I know." He said, "Your godfather arranged him." She said, "I know that too." A pause. His hands were folded on the desk. The irregular knuckle on the right hand caught the light from the west window. He said, "Why now?" Not a challenge. An assessment question. The kind he would ask a trade negotiator who had changed terms mid-contract. Nova said, "Because I've been working from the foundational texts for 2 months and the supervised curriculum is covering ground I've already integrated. If I stay in the current arrangement, I'll be rehearsing rather than advancing." She paused. "I don't have time to rehearse." Rian looked at her. She held the look without performing anything under it, not contrition, not defiance, not the old Nova's cultivated poise. Just the statement, available for evaluation. He said, "Mavet reports you've developed unexpected independent tendencies." She thought, "Of course he does. 3-day pipeline." She said, "I hope they're good tendencies." The corner of his mouth moved, not a smile, something adjacent to one, quickly disciplined back into place. He said, "Your examination is in 6 weeks." She said, "Yes." He said, "If you dismiss your tutor and underperform, that will be noted." She said, "If I keep my tutor and underperform because I'm bored into sloppiness, that will also be noted." Silence. Rian picked up the petition. He read it again, though she was certain he had already read it twice. He set it down. He took his pen. He signed. He said, "I'll inform Mavet today." She said, "Thank you." He said, "Nova." He used her name without title, the second time he had done so. "Don't make me regret treating this as a competence decision rather than a character decision." She said, "I won't." She meant it in the only way that mattered, not as a promise of goodness, but as a commitment to outcomes he could live with. Mavet left on the 75th morning. He was professionally gracious. He told her she had been an exceptional student. He told her he hoped she would continue to apply herself at the academy. He did not ask why. He did not demand an explanation. He was, she thought, a man who had been trained to accept reversals without making them personal, because personal reactions created records. As he was leaving the morning room with his satchel, he paused at the door. He said, "The archivist will want to know you've chosen independent study." She said, "I'm sure he will." He said, "He's taken a personal interest." She said, "I know." Mavet's expression was unreadable, not hostile, not wounded. The expression of someone delivering a message they had been told to deliver and choosing not to add interpretation. He left. She stood in the morning room with the primary text on the table and the architecture volume on the shelf and the historical innovations volume beside it and thought about a monitored system losing a local agent. She thought, Crane will adjust his assessment. She thought, good. Let him. I'd rather he adjust from a position where he thinks I'm reading his gifts than from a position where he thinks I'm still inside Mavet's curriculum. She opened the primary text to the chapter on compound conditionals and began the day's work. The report reached Valheim 3 days later, because of course it did. Nova did not see the report. She would not see it for years. But in a study in the Royal Academy district, in a room with white and silver fittings and books that were older than most families, Grand Archivist Vethan Crane read Mavet's letter at his desk and set it down with care. Lady Vane has developed unexpected independent tendencies. She has petitioned successfully to end supervised instruction and will pursue independent study until examination. Crane read it twice. He made a notation in a ledger she did not know existed, a thin volume, unlabeled, kept in a locked drawer, and beside Nova's name he wrote a date and a phrase. Independent. Cipher affinity confirmed. Watching. He did not look troubled. He looked interested. Which was, Nova would have said if she had seen his face, exactly the wrong kind of interest and exactly the kind she had expected. She was in the Inscription garden that night, practicing a 3-input compound sequence, when the first full emergent effect activated, the reinforcement inscription adjusting its density based on ambient humidity as well as pressure. A behavior she had not specified, a behavior the grammar implied if you built the conditional tree correctly. Her cipher ink was darkening at the edges, purple-black beginning to show through the gray-white like a terminal theme finally loading the correct color profile. She dismissed the inscription and wrote it again from memory. She thought, Mavet is gone. She thought, the curriculum is mine now. She thought, the watcher is still watching. She went inside and updated the notebook and slept for 5 hours, which was more than she had been sleeping and still not enough. The manor was quieter without Mavet's morning footsteps in the corridor. She noticed she did not miss them. 2 days later, a letter arrived for Rian, Academy correspondence, copied to the estate, standard procedure. She did not read it. She did not need to. Perrin's face when he filed the copy told her enough. Mavet had sent his report. The household machinery was still connected to Valheim in ways she could not sever with a single petition. She spent the extra time in the schoolroom anyway. The room smelled like Mavet's sandalwood soap for another week before it faded. She opened the windows. She worked at the lesson table with the primary text and did not sit in the chair Mavet had favored, small superstition or small hygiene. Some associations were harder to debug than others. On the 88th day, she received a note from Crane through the estate's formal correspondence channel. 2 sentences on Crane stationery, handwritten. I hear you have chosen independent study. I am glad. Come to me at the academy with questions when you arrive. The door is always open for you. No mention of Mavet. No mention of the architecture volume. No mention of historical innovations. She read it twice and filed it under, continued monitoring, warmer wrapper. She did not reply. Some channels you did not acknowledge if you were not ready to accept the bandwidth costs. She went to the garden instead and wrote compound sequences until the stars above the east wing wall were sharp and cold, and her cipher ink held purple-black on the stone like a console finally running the right theme. The curriculum was hers now. The watcher was still watching. That was the equilibrium. For the next 6 weeks, it would have to be enough. 6 weeks before the examination, on the 81st day, she wrote the inscription that confirmed rank 2. She knew it was rank 2 because the pre-academy foundational text said so, not as a label you received from an institution, but as a functional description, multi-instruction sequences with chained effects, emergent properties possible from instruction interaction, conditional bridges stable across 3 or more operations. She had been building toward it for weeks the way she had once built toward a stable exploit chain, not by forcing the final step, but by making sure every prior step was sound enough that the last one could not fail without telling her exactly where the failure lived. The inscription garden at midnight was cold. Early autumn had arrived in the eastern valleys with the particular honesty of a season that did not pretend to be summer anymore. Her breath showed in the lamplight. The stone tablets held the night's damp. The third planter sat against the east wall, ordinary, full of soil, and something heavier than soil underneath. Theo was not there tonight. She worked alone on the largest tablet with her hair tied back and her sleeves rolled to the wrist, and the metal stylus she had begun using for precision work, not yet forge-enhanced. Not yet anything except a tool she had bought from the ink quarter on a rare trip to the market town with Wren's kitchen errands as cover. The compound sequence had 3 conditional inputs. Input 1, ambient light level below threshold to activate base reinforcement. Input 2, physical pressure on the inscribed surface to increase reinforcement density proportional to pressure. Input 3, humidity above threshold to redirect a portion of the reinforcement effect into moisture resistance, emergent branch, not separately specified. She had built the tree twice on paper. She had failed it once on stone 3 nights ago. The bridge between the second and third inputs had been too tight, a syntax error that compiled until runtime and then didn't. Tonight the bridge held. She wrote the sequence slowly. Cipher ink flowed from her fingertips in a color that was mostly purple-black now, with only a faint ghost of gray at the edges where her mana had not fully settled into this body's mature signature. The notation dried on the stone in the particular luminescence of active work, not bright, not showy, the quiet glow of a system coming online. She finished the last operation. She waited. The inscription held. She pressed her palm to the stone and felt the reinforcement activate under her hand, dense, responsive, adjusting as she increased pressure. She wiped damp from the tablet's edge with 2 fingers and felt the moisture resistance engage, a secondary hardness along the waterline she had not explicitly instructed. Emergent from the conditional tree exactly the way the foundational text said rank 2 breakthroughs happened. Recognition of emergence. She sat back on her heels and looked at the inscription for a long time. Rank 2, not witnessed, not certified, not announced, but hers. She tested it 3 more times, dismiss, rewrite, dismiss, rewrite, until she could produce the sequence from memory without reference to the paper in her pocket. Muscle memory for a notation system was not unlike muscle memory for a keyboard layout, awkward at first, then inevitable. On the 4th attempt the emergent humidity branch appeared faster. She thought, I'm not memorizing the approved patterns. I'm deriving from grammar. She thought, that is exactly what Kira did. She thought, that is exactly what someone does not want too many people doing. She dismissed the inscription and stood up and walked the garden perimeter once, cold air on her face, the manor dark above her except for 2 windows in the west wing where Rian worked late when the estate required it. She did not tell anyone. Not Rian, he would hear rank 2 and recalculate again, and she was not ready for what he might do with that recalculation before the examination. Not Theo, he would be proud and visible about it, and pride at 14 was a data leak. Not Crane, never Crane, not until she understood what game his interest was serving. She would perform at rank 1 in any witnessed context until the examination calibration required otherwise. The examination would get rank 2, upper end, clean, approved notation where anyone was watching, cipher only in the margins she chose to show. She went to her room. She opened the notebook under the floorboard. She wrote, Rank 2 confirmed, private. Compound 3 input with emergent humidity branch. Cipher ink stabilizing purple-black. Examination in 42 days. Public reveal. Calibrated upper rank 2. No higher. She closed the notebook. She lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about the gap between what she was and what she showed, the oldest skill in her repertoire, the social engineer's core competency, now applied to magic instead of meetings. In her previous life, the gap had been a weapon. In this life, it was armor. She thought, same tool, different threat model. She slept. In the morning, she ate breakfast and answered a letter from Lady Sephra about the pre-academy gathering and helped Finn carry linens without being asked and practiced in the schoolroom where Mavet used to teach. A rank 1 compound inscription in approved notation for the housemaid who had come to clean the room and would report, if anyone asked, that the lady was studying diligently and without surprises. The housemaid left satisfied. Nova returned to the primary text. The gap held. That afternoon, she walked to the market town with Wren's errands as cover, blue leaf, thread, a replacement clasp for the kitchen scales, and bought the stylus from a metalworker who asked no questions beyond payment method. It was plain iron with a copper grip, nothing forge worked, nothing that would register as valuable if someone searched her bags at the embassy. She tested it that night on the smallest garden tablet. The notation flowed cleaner. Small upgrade, large difference, the kind of tooling improvement she had known in her previous life when a decent keyboard finally replaced the one that came with the laptop. Hardware mattered. Pretending it didn't was for people who had never been bottlenecked by input lag. On the 83rd day, Theo found her in the schoolroom practicing approved notation for an imaginary audience. He said, "You're doing the simple one." She said, "I'm doing the one someone might walk in and see." He said, "And the other one?" She said, "At night." He considered this. He said, "The other one is better." She said, "The other one is mine." He nodded as though that answered a question he had been carrying since he brought her the folder. He sat down across the table and opened his own practice paper. They worked in silence for an hour, two people in the same room running different permission levels on the same operating system, which was, she thought, the most honest family interaction she had ever been part of. When he left, she went to the garden. Rank 2 was not power. Not in any sense that would matter at the academy, where rank 5 students would look at rank 2 the way senior engineers looked at bootcamp graduates, politely, with the knowledge that production environments were unforgiving. But rank 2 was a floor. A minimum viable product. Proof that the cipher grammar she had stolen back from suppression could compile in this body, in this world, under observation by no one except the cold and the stone. She wrote the 3-input sequence one more time before dawn. It held. She went inside. 42 days to examination. The gap held. She intended to keep it that way until the moment she chose not to. In the morning, she added a line to the notebook under the floorboard. Rank 2, confirmed private, day 81. Public sealing until examination, upper rank 1 or lower rank 2. Do not demonstrate emergent branches where witnesses exist. Then she ate breakfast and answered a household question about luggage weight limits as though her internal architecture had not just crossed a threshold the Academy's approved curriculum said should take 6 months of supervised instruction. The housemaid who cleaned the schoolroom reported, if anyone asked, that the lady was studying diligently and without surprises. No one asked. The gap held. The letters from the academy began arriving in a cluster, as though someone had sent a signal that the old Nova was back online and the network was polling for response. 7 in 10 days. Nova read them at the writing desk with a pot of tea she did not drink and a sheet of paper where she tracked response patterns the way she used to track, which compromised accounts were still active after a credential rotation, not by content alone, but by who persisted when the authentication behavior changed. Letter 1 from Lord Edwick, cautious warmth, reference to the pre-academy gathering, no mention of Sierra Lune by name. He was recalibrated. The earlier redirect was holding. Letter 2 from Lady Maris Avel, explicit request to resume the project regarding the scholarship placement, language vague enough to be deniable. specific enough to confirm the old Nova had been running social pressure campaigns against commoner students. Nova filed Maris as hostile obligation. Letter 3, from a Lord Casson. Money. A loan repayment that was not a loan. The old Nova had been a node in a financial network Nova did not yet understand. She wrote back pleasantly, "Accounts under review. Will respond after examination." Casson would wait or he would not. Waiting cost him. Good. Letter 4, from someone named Pell who signed with a house crest she did not recognize. Social invitation couched as alliance offer. No hostility. Opportunism. Pell wanted proximity to House Vane's Eastern trade connections. Nova wrote back, delighted to connect at the gathering, non-committal on everything else. Letter 5, from Lady Foreign. Finally, the seating question. As we discussed, the arrangement for the Loon Girl at the opening banquet. I have held the table as you instructed, but the steward is asking for confirmation. Nova read it twice. The old Nova had been engineering Sierra Loon's social humiliation through seating, petty, effective, the kind of cruelty that left no bruises and plenty of witnesses. She wrote back, "I've reconsidered the seating plan. Please release the hold. Lady Loon's daughter should be seated appropriately for her house." Foreign's reply arrived in 3 days. Understood. Surprised, but understood. Letter 6. From an academy senior, she did not know, request for endorsement of a disciplinary complaint against a first-year scholarship student. The complaint was about unauthorized notation. Nova wrote back, "I don't involve myself in academy discipline before enrollment." Short. Final. Letter 7, from M. Nothing new. A follow-up on the arrangement she had never answered because the drafts were burned and the operator had changed. Per our arrangement, the second phase is scheduled to begin at enrollment. Confirm receipt. Nova did not confirm receipt. She copied the letters phrasing into the notebook and marked M as active threat, unknown handler, timeline tied to enrollment. 3 of the 7 stopped writing after her replies. Edwick, Pell, and the unknown senior, silence or redirected warmth. They had tested the new authentication behavior, received a response that did not match the old credentials, and chosen paths of least friction. 2 adjusted tone. Maris and Casson colder, more careful, still engaged but no longer assuming command authority. They were waiting to see if the anomaly persisted. 2 persisted as problems. Foreign, surprised but compliant, worth monitoring. M, unanswered, dangerous precisely because the arrangement's second phase was scheduled without her consent. Nova laid the letters out on the desk in 3 groups and looked at them. In her previous life, this would have been a network map after a breach, which nodes still trusted the old password, which had gone quiet, which were probing for escalation. She thought, the old Nova built a machine. She thought, I'm not dismantling the machine. I'm changing what it does when it runs. She thought, M is still expecting phase 2 at enrollment. She wrote in the notebook, Academy Network mapped, partial. Hostiles, Maris, M, unknown. Opportunists, Casson, Pell. Neutral recalibrated. Edwick, foreign. Senior disciplinary requester, withdrawn. Enrollment means M phase 2 trigger. Do not know what phase 2 is. Treat as high priority unknown before enrollment. She burned nothing this time. Burning was for plans she would never execute. These were intelligence assets, incoming mail that told her who still thought she was someone else. She filed the letters in the false drawer compartment, not the campaign plans compartment, a second slot she had found behind the first, and went to the inscription garden. Theo was there, practicing the pause notation on the small tablet. She said, your third input is early. He said, I know. I'm fixing it. She sat on the wall at her end of the garden and watched him fix it and thought about networks and brothers and the distance between 17 and 14, which was not as large as the distance between who she had been and who she was trying to become. When he got the sequence right on the 5th attempt, she did not praise him. She said, again, from memory. He said, you're worse than Mavet. She said, Mavet was teaching you the wrong language. He looked at her quick, sharp, and went back to the tablet. The cipher ink on the stone was gray-white at his edges and steady at the core. Hers, when she practiced after he left, was purple-black and held. The gap between them was not only rank. It was also time in this world, and trust, and the slow accumulation of choosing not to hurt someone when hurting them would have been easier. She wrote until her hands ached. She went inside. The letters waited in the drawer. The network waited in Valheim. She had 42 days to become someone who could survive both. On the 90th day, she tested her public-facing performance in conditions that approximated stress. Rian called her to the West Wing to review examination paperwork, travel authorization, embassy lodging, the administrative skin of a departure that had been arranged before she woke up in this body. He asked her, in passing, to demonstrate a simple inscription for the estate's visiting notary, who needed to verify that the heir could produce cipher ink at all. Witnesses. Paperwork. The notary's board professionalism. Nova wrote a rank 1 light inscription in approved notation on the provided tablet. Clean. Modest. The glow steady and unremarkable. The notary stamped the form. Rian signed. The machinery moved. In the corridor afterward, alone, she flexed her fingers and thought about the gap, the distance between what she had just shown and what she could do in the garden at midnight. Social engineering had always been about managing which version of yourself was authenticated in which context. This was the same skill with a different credential type. That night, she wrote a letter to Lady Sephra accepting the pre-academy gathering invitation and proposing they introduce themselves to Cyril Loon together, in neutral language at neutral volume. Item 1 from the old Nova's burned plan, preempt the arranged introduction by making one on her own terms. She sealed it before she could second-guess the politics. Some moves you made because the threat model required them, not because you felt ready for the social consequences. She went to the garden. The letters waited in the drawer. The network waited in Valheim. 40 days now. She practiced until her hands ached. Before she blew out the lamp, she copied M's letter phrasing one more time into the notebook, second phase scheduled to begin at enrollment, and drew a box around the word enrollment the way she used to box API endpoints that triggered irreversible state changes. Whatever M's phase 2 was, it would fire when she crossed the academy gates, unless she found the handler first. That was a problem for the academy. Tonight the problem was her hands, her ink, and the stone. She wrote until both were steady. Then she locked the drawer with the 7 letters and the M follow-up and stood at the window, looking toward the hills that hid Valheim beyond the horizon line. Somewhere in that direction, Cyril Loon, who did not know Nova had burned a campaign against her. Caden Avail, who did not know Nova had already decided to treat him as a person rather than a novel footnote. An academy built on anchor nodes she had not yet seen and a restricted section she had not yet breached. 40 days. She blew out the lamp. The network could wait until she was in the same city as its nodes. The night before departure, she went to the Inscription garden alone. Not midnight, earlier, while the sky was still dark blue at the edges and the household lights were on in the kitchens and the West Wing. She had packed her bags. She had reviewed the correspondence one final time. She had left Theo a notation sheet in the schoolroom, not a gift with strings, not an explanation, just the humidity branch correction he had been struggling with, written in cipher and left where he would find it in the morning. She did not say goodbye tonight. Goodbye, in her experience, was a performance that committed you to an emotional narrative other people could use. She would leave in the morning. That was enough. The garden was autumn quiet. The fountain basin dry. The third planter against the east wall unchanged, the box still underneath, still not hers to take without taking something from Theo she was not willing to take. Kira's working notes lived in her memory now, encoded in private cipher, a lossless compression of the only inheritance she had been able to carry without stealing from her brother. She stood at the center tablet and did not write an inscription. She put her hand flat on the stone and felt the cold through her palm. She thought about Hannah Seo. 27. Korean American in a country that had never quite decided what to do with that hyphen. Moderate poverty, excellent pattern recognition, a gift for systems she had spent 15 years renting to the highest bidder. A code, don't hurt individuals directly, don't sell to governments, don't take jobs that kill people. A code that had let her steal insulin research from a non-profit and tell herself the non-profit wasn't a person, so the harm didn't count. She thought about the car park on Hewitt Street. She thought about 40 chapters of a web novel read on a cracked phone screen while waiting for men she had misprofiled. She thought, I died stupid. Not because she was killed, everyone was killed eventually, one way or another, but because she had been killed in the narrow gap between knowing what she was and deciding to stop. A gap she had kept open on purpose, because the money was real and the damage was abstract, and abstraction was the oldest exploit in self-defense. She thought about Nova. 17. A body she had not earned. A story she had only partially read. A villainous label sewn into the narrative before she opened her eyes. A father who had signed a petition to remove her tutor and watched her with recalculation instead of forgiveness. A brother who had said we and meant it as a boundary and a claim. A godfather who grieved her mother sincerely and sent her maps of cages with beautiful bindings. A staff who had almost told her who Kira was. A garden where her mother had practiced at midnight because the work needed quiet to hear itself think. She thought, I have no allies. She thought, that is less true than it was. She thought, I have no power profile. She thought, also less true than it was, if power is what you can do and not what anyone has certified you to do. She thought, I have the name of a woman who is supposed to die. She was not ready. She had never been ready for anything that mattered. Readiness, in her experience, was a story people told afterward to make the sequence feel inevitable. Before the sequence you had resources, constraints, and the decision to move anyway. She was in exactly the place she was, nowhere safe, everything to do. 27 years of knowing how to be useful in hostile territory compressed into a 17-year-old body with purple-black cipher ink and a notebook under a floorboard, and a brother who would find a notation sheet in the morning and pretend he was not pleased, not triumphant, honest. The wind moved in the east wing wall shelter. A horse shifted in the stable yard. Somewhere inside, Ren was still awake. Kitchens ran late before travel days, bread to prepare, provisions to pack. Nova took her hand off the stone. She went inside one last time through the garden archway. She did not look back at the third planter. She had made a promise in the dark 3 weeks ago, not tonight, when you're ready, and Theo had not shown her the box yet, and some things were worth waiting for because the waiting was the trust. She climbed the stairs to her room. The bags were by the door. The floorboard was secured. The architecture volume and historical innovations remained on the shelf, too heavy to carry, too flagged to take, knowledge already extracted into the notebook and her memory. The pre-academy foundational text was in her bag, wrapped in oilcloth, because some tools were worth the wait. She lay down fully dressed on top of the coverlet. She did not sleep for a long time. When she did, she dreamed of notation, conditional trees branching in directions the approved curriculum said were dead ends, and at the end of one branch a door she had not opened yet, east wing, locked, a desk underneath with something her mother had hidden because the world was not ready and Kira Vane had been ready anyway. She woke before dawn. The manor was already stirring. Departure day. She breathed once, slow, the way you did before a penetration test you had prepared for and still could not fully predict, not because preparation failed, but because live systems always had variables documentation omitted. She stood up. She picked up her bag. She went downstairs. In the kitchen corridor, she passed Ren, who was up earlier than anyone had a right to be on a travel day. Ren said, "Eat on the road. Not when you arrive." Before. Nova said, "Yes, Ren." Ren studied her for a moment, the same measurement from the prep table, from the blue leaf conversation, from the Colm reroute she had not officially explained and Ren had not officially acknowledged. Ren said, "Your mother left the same way. First time to the capital." She paused. She came back smarter than she left. "Try to do that." Nova said, "I'll try." Ren nodded and went back to the kitchen. Nova stood in the corridor for one extra second with that sentence in her ears, came back smarter, and filed it under. Things people almost said that were actually everything. At the bottom of the stairs, she saw Theo through the window, still on the steps, still with his hands in his pockets. He had not gone inside. He would go inside after the carriage cleared the bend, she thought. He would find the notation sheet in the schoolroom. He would practice the humidity branch correction and not tell anyone she had left it. She hoped he would practice. She could not control that from the road. Control was always partial. You chose what to optimize for. She stepped into the courtyard with her bag and the road food and the oilcloth-wrapped text and the travel notebook and the name of a woman who had asked questions in margins. The air smelled like horses and cold stone and bread from Ren's parcel warming slowly against her ribs. Through the carriage window frame, she could see Theo on the steps, hands in his pockets, shoulders set, one hand ready to rise if the moment required it. She thought about the notation sheet in the schoolroom. She thought about the box under the third planter. She thought about East Wing doors still locked and proof still waiting, and a capital full of people who thought they already knew who she was. Inventory complete. Action required. She was not ready. She had never been ready for anything that mattered. She crossed the courtyard toward the carriage anyway. Behind her, the manor held everything she could not carry yet: Crane's books on the shelf, Kira's box in the garden, Rian's 12 seconds stored in memory like a file too large to attach to an email, but too important to delete. Ahead of her, the road. She climbed into the carriage and pulled the door closed. The wheels would turn. The road would continue. She intended to edit what came next heavily. The carriage was in the courtyard at first light. Dov had the horses ready, 2 chestnuts for the carriage team, a bay for the outrider Nova did not know by name but recognized as competent from the way he held the reins. The luggage was loaded. The vein colors were correct without being loud. Everything about the departure was professionally unremarkable, which was how a great house moved its children to the capital, not as spectacle, as procedure. Nova stood on the steps with her bag and watched the household assemble itself around the event the way networks assembled around a scheduled maintenance window. Everyone knew their role. No one had to be told. Finn carried a final bundle to the carriage and did not meet her eyes. Alia checked the guest room list even though no guests were involved. Perrin held a clipboard. Ren came out of the kitchen wing with a wrapped parcel and thrust it into Nova's hands without ceremony. She said, "Road food. You'll eat it, or I'll hear about it." Nova said, "Thank you, Ren." Ren looked at her one long assessment, the kind that measured change without announcing the measurement, and went back inside without another word. Rian Vane was not scheduled to be here. She knew his schedule because Perrin's clipboard was not entirely private, and because she had learned, over 10 weeks, to read the manor's administrative rhythms the way she read server logs. The Duke was in the West Wing at this hour on departure days. Correspondence review. Estate reports. The work that did not pause because the eldest daughter was leaving for the capital. She had not expected him in the courtyard. He came out of the main hall as she was checking the carriage step boots, not indoor shoes, which was information. He stopped at a conversational distance, not close enough for intimacy, not far enough for formality. He said nothing of consequence. He looked at her. She counted, because she counted things when she was nervous, and she was not going to pretend she was not nervous this morning. 12 seconds. 13. His face did not brace. Not for the old Nova's cruelty. Not for the old Nova's performance. Not for the thing he had been expecting every time he looked at her for 10 weeks and had been flinching away from in advance. He was simply looking at the person in front of him. It was not forgiveness. It was not recognition. It was not anything that had a clean label in any language she spoke. It was the beginning of something. She did not say anything either. Words right now would have been a kind of lie, either too small for what the 12 seconds contained or too large for what they were allowed to be at. Rian nodded once. He went back inside. She stood in the courtyard with Ren's road food in her hands, and the parcel, suddenly heavier than bread, had any right to be. Theo was on the manor steps. He had not come down to the courtyard. He was at the top of the 3 stone steps, hands in his pockets, shoulders set in the particular way of someone who had decided not to run and not to wave and not to give anyone a scene they could narrate later. She looked up at him. He raised one hand, not a wave, a single acknowledgement, the same gesture she had seen soldiers use in airports in her previous life when they were not allowed to make a production of goodbye. She raised one hand back. Neither of them smiled. The carriage door closed. The horses moved. The courtyard receded, stone walls, East Wing, Inscription garden invisible behind the angle of the house, Third planter gone. The box still under it. Theo's notes still in his folder. Kira's handwriting still alive in 2 bodies now instead of 1. Nova sat back against the seat and set Ren's parcel on her lap. The manor disappeared behind the first bend in the drive. The road east toward Valheim was long. She had read the distance in estate records: 5 days with good horses and dry weather, 6 if the autumn rains came early. The examination was still weeks away. The embassy would receive her. The academy district would swallow her the way institutions swallowed everyone, with the orientation packet and a room assignment, and the assumption that you already knew the rules. She opened her bag enough to confirm the oilcloth-wrapped text was secure. She opened the notebook, not the one under the floorboard, the travel copy, cipher notation dents on every page, and reviewed the network map one more time. M. Phase 2 at enrollment. Unknown. Crane, watching. Interested. Maris, hostile. Edwick, recalibrated. Cyril Loon, not yet met. Heroine. Person, if Nova had anything to say about it. Caden Ashvale, not yet met. The novel had not given him enough pages to be anything except a name attached to hatred she had not yet earned in this body, and had absolutely earned in the last one. She closed the notebook. Outside, the eastern valleys rolled past River Light, mineral towns in the distance, the trade routes that had made House Vane wealthy and would, if she survived long enough, become the infrastructure of whatever she built next. She thought about 40 chapters and 200 she had not read. She thought about the villainess who died and the woman in the carriage who had no intention of cooperating with that ending. She thought, the manor chapter was over. She thought, the academy is next, and the academy is where the novel really started, and the novel was wrong about what mattered. She ate Ren's bread because Ren would hear about it if she didn't. The road unspooled ahead. Valheim waited. She was not ready. She went anyway. The first day on the road was administrative boredom and landscape, the particular combination of long travel that made your mind either soft or sharp depending on what you fed it. Nova fed it notation. She did not write on the carriage seat, too visible, too easy to jostle, but she ran conditional trees in her head the way she used to run exploit chains on long flights when her laptop was stowed and her brain was not. If humidity exceeds threshold, branch to moisture resistance. If pressure increases, scale reinforcement density. If light falls below minimum, activate base layer. Mental compilation. 0 ciphering cost. Useful for debugging logic before it touched stone. The outrider changed horses at a way station at midday. Dov had trained them well. The stop was efficient, no drama. Nova ate Ren's bread and cheese at the edge of the yard and watched the other travelers, merchants, a minor noble family in Western colors. 2 academy-bound students with ink-stained fingers arguing about notation theory with the passionate inaccuracy of people who had memorized answers without understanding grammar. She listened without joining. Information was free in public arguments if you knew how to filter for what someone actually believed versus what they had been taught to repeat. By evening they reached the first posting inn. Vane Colors got a private room, hot water, a meal that was better than road food and worse than Ren's kitchen. Nova wrote in the travel notebook until her wrist tired, then reviewed the network map again. M. Phase 2 at enrollment. Crane. Door always open. Theo. Humidity branch correction. Hopefully found. Rian. 12 seconds in the courtyard. She closed the notebook. 5 days to Valheim. Weeks to examination. A novel she had not finished and a conspiracy the novel had never mentioned and a man somewhere in the capital who hated her for what the old Nova had done to his sister. She lay in the inn bed and listened to rain on the roof, autumn arriving on schedule, and thought about the Inscription library in the East Wing study she had not yet entered, the proof she had not yet found. The villainous ending she had already begun to treat as a legacy bug in poorly maintained code. Legacy bugs could be patched. Sometimes they required rewriting the whole module. She slept. The road continued in the morning. Valheim waited. She was not ready. She went anyway.